lightning tour. We have visited Spain on a number of occasions. We love the place. We many years ago went to Granada, the Alhambra, Cordoba, but those photographs are on slides and I have yet to digitize those. So at the moment, what we're going to do is to go through a number of cities. There'll be lightning tours, just impressions of the city, some of the photographs that I've taken. I enjoy taking photographs, so hopefully they'll inspire you to visit if you haven't already visited. And we'll end up with a wonderful holiday we had with my brother, who is a botanist, and his wife in the Costa Europa. Right, exploring in Madrid. And while we were staying in Madrid, we took the train up to El Escorial and also to Toledo and Segovia. All three easily visited by train from Madrid, and then a quick trip to Bilbao and Burgos, which we visited when we were over in the Picos. Then we'll have a break, and then the second part will be Barcelona and the Picos. Madrid, the main palace, the royal palace, is over to the left of the map, with the park behind it, and immediately opposite the palace, just below it there on the photograph, is the cathedral. We were staying, if you go over to the right, right down at the bottom is the main railway station, and then leading up from there to the left of the garden area is the Paseo del Prado, the main road which passes the Prado Museum. And we had a hotel right on that strip there. We were staying in the hotel on the right, with very impressive, they've obviously demolished a building here, and it's very impressive green wall with living plants on it, and one of the museums behind. The main railway station, and you expect to walk through the front doors and straight onto the platforms, but this whole front area of main glazed train shed, I suppose, is now a botanic garden, and the railway station, the actual train platforms, are way behind that. Very impressive building. One of the pediments on the royal palace, built by Philip V. The royal palace. Now, when you visit Madrid, it's best to check when the public holidays are, and because places are closed. So we discovered, even though it wasn't a public holiday, there was some official visit going on, so we were not able to go inside the royal palace and see the treasures, but nonetheless, very impressive building. And over to just behind the palace, or to the side of the palace, is the cathedral. Cathedral wasn't finished until the 1950s, I think it was. So quite a modern building, and you're able to get up onto the roof of the cathedral, seeing across towards I think that's the Opera House that you can just see there, with these impressive statues. And looking from the roof of the cathedral across to the royal palace, and over to the left in the distance, the hills. We've still got snow on them. We were there in end of April, beginning of May. Inside the cathedral, the new modern organ that's been built by a Spanish builder called Gerhard Grenzing. I have heard a YouTube clip which is pretty impressive. The thing we love about Spain are the markets and the colour of everything that goes on and the variety of vegetables, fruit, meat market, biscuit market, sweet markets, and so on. The main square in Madrid, the Plaza Mayor, and lots of pavement cafes, and it's nice to be able to sit and have a coffee and just watch the world go by. While we were there, Spider-Man was going to do a demonstration, but we're not quite sure whether Spider-Man had overdosed on flies or not. It's quite fun. And the other thing we love about Madrid are all these little squares and back alleys and full of interesting buildings. The brickwork's nice pink honey-coloured texture. That's the this is behind the Prado and is the modern extension to the Prado, and the two buildings are linked by an underground corridor, but quite an impressive piece of modern architecture. This we loved. This was on the Paseo del Prado, and basically it's a mobile bar. So you sit at the bar drinking your pint, pedaling furiously, and yeah, mobile bar. Nobody seems to have brought one of those over to this country yet, but what do they call it? A bar bike or something like that. Great fun. Inevitably, when you're going to the Prado, this is really early morning to get into the Prado. The queues have formed. Yes, there are a lot of people, but it is one of the world's great museums and art galleries. And in the room with the famous Velasquez, just takes your breath away. It's just wonderful. Behind the Prado was the gardens, and with being April, May, this must have been one of the best displays of irises that we saw. The infinite colours, wonderful. Right, so train from Madrid, the railway line you can see on the right, top right, leading down, and then just down, just off the picture, is the railway station, and then you walk up the line, the avenue of trees, which I don't think, yes, you may be able to see my arrow working its way. You work up the avenue and then to the monastery of San Lorenzo, built by Philip II. And this is where the family lived in the summer. And this is where the Princess Maria Barbara was taught the harp, to learn to play the harpsichord by her teacher Domenico Scarlatti. Scarlatti lived in San Lorenzo Monastery in the El Escorial for many years, and the result is the legacy of 500 odd sonatas, most wonderful music. Behind the monastery, or on this map, just above it, there's El Escorial Arriba. That's the town that developed with a lot of the staff working for the palace. So you arrive by train, good old Spanish trains, and then work your way up this wonderful avenue of trees. No sign of the monastery, and then you come across this amazing building. And of course, what did we do? We went to visit it on May the 1st, which happens to be May Day, everywhere closed. So we weren't able to go in, and I suppose this was perhaps the major disappointment, but nonetheless, we were able to see this extraordinary building. Very plain in terms of decoration, nothing I mean, the majority of buildings being built in Spain at this period of time would be quite highly ornamented, as we will see later. But this, I think, is powerful for its simplicity. And the main square and the village behind. Horse chestnut trees were out, and there are these side chapels to El Escorial, and pavement cafes, and we were able to sit under the horse chestnuts enjoying lunch. That's another thing we like about Spain, the food. And back down the avenue of trees to the railway station. Our next foray out from Madrid was to Toledo, an amazing town built on a rocky outcrop in the bend of the river. The sort of comparable one in this country would be Durham, where the River Wear does a U-bend and there's a rocky outcrop, and the cathedral's built on that. And with Toledo, it's the Alcazar, wonderful castle just to the right there, and then the cathedral. You arrive at the railway station, which is this most wonderful 19th century interpretation of Moorish Islamic architecture. Quite fun. I think if I'd been a bricklayer, I would have enjoyed myself. And the famous view of the castle from down by the river. And it was here that the famous Spanish, the famous Greek Cretan painter Domenicus Theotokopoulos lived, known in Spain as El Greco. And the great thing in the cathedral in the sacristy is that there is one of his paintings there. But, this is the Alcazar, view from the Alcazar, looking over at the countryside, giving you an idea. And these lovely Roman pantiling roofs. Inside the main, the castle, the Alcazar. Nice polished floor, giving a reflection. And we noticed in Spain with a lot of the 19th century buildings that they have these fabulous pieces of cast iron curtain walling to the staircases. We saw them in Burgos and in Barcelona as well. So, from the cathedral, looking across the rooftops to the castle and the roof of the cathedral with these lovely clay pantiles. One of the Moorish buildings in Toledo, this lovely decorative brick, and they use little pieces, slips of glazed tile, which is quite Islamic. Nice piece of brick decoration. Those who've heard me talk before know that I am hooked on brick as an architect, but there we go. For start, to one of the churches in Toledo. And so to Toledo Cathedral, Spanish Gothic, lots and lots of decoration. And in the choir, 2 organs facing each other. And organs on the Iberian Peninsula have these wonderful batteries of horizontal trumpet pipes, sort of blast their way across the choir to each other. Somebody discovered that if the upper harmonics in those pipes are considerably enhanced when they're placed horizontally. So they're a bit awesome, but I would have loved to have had a go, but, maybe another time. But lots of decoration, lots of gold. See this wonderful El Greco painting of Christ. And as is often with paintings from this particular period, they dress the soldiers not in clothes from the period of Christ, but you've got a soldier there in Renaissance Spanish clothing. The river under Toledo caught the bus back down and then to the station. Right, and now we're in Segovia. Now, the great thing about Segovia is it's on a rocky outcrop, a peak. It's built on the top of the hill, and the Romans, in order to get water into the town, had this fabulous aqueduct. One of the little Romanesque churches by the bus stop, and then over in the distance, the cathedral. On the tower of the cathedral, the storks were nesting. They'd arrived back and were getting their nests ready, which was quite fun to see those. So here is the aqueduct. And it comes in and turns the corner and then launches itself over to the left off the picture, down across the valley over to the town. It's the most extraordinary structure. I don't know what more to say about it, really, other than it's one of the marvels of Roman engineering. So to the cathedral, again, Spanish Gothic, loads and loads of decoration on the finials, pinnacles, and all the way around the parapets. And inside, one of the things I have always enjoyed seeing are the various forms of vaulting that there are in cathedrals and large churches. Theoretically, the ribs are sufficient structure, and then the infill in between is purely non-load bearing. And these were quite good. I mean, the most famous vaulting that we have in this country, or the most decorative, I suppose, is King's College Chapel. Some of the simplest are from the Romanesque period, but here these beautiful sort of leaf shape, and under the central tower, to the right, the vaulting that we were looking at before. To the left, some quite intricate vaulting. Up the tower to the bell chamber, and the views across to the hills and the surrounding countryside. And their castle, the Alcazar, is at the end there. That's quite like a fairy tale castle, that particular one. Down in the cloisters of the cathedral, very intricate vaulting. So not vaulting, tracery, very intricate tracery. Little side roads down from the cathedral, wandering slowly back towards the bus stop. Interesting facade, a stone facade of one of the buildings in Segovia. Down in the main square, where they got a roundabout and tourists, and we had a look and the little street cafe there, but you get an idea of the scale of the aqueduct here and the people stood underneath it. And back to the train and the embankment with wildflowers on it, very colourful. And then finally, Bilbao. Bilbao is now famous for the Guggenheim Museum there, that was built by designed by the American architect Frank Gehry. Not a right angle in sight, but it's the airport there. We can reach it from Manchester to Manchester Bilbao, so that's very handy. Here's the famous Guggenheim. It's quite a building, and it's got this highly reflective metal cladding, so anything surrounding it is reflected off it. Modern road bridge coming in by the side, and there's this fantastic floral dog outside, which is quite fun. And you can see the way the dog's reflected off the cladding. It was a very impressive building, and inside very impressive. Bilbao is quite fun because they have got a coordinated transport and public services policy. So there's the Bilbao bus, and there's the Bilbao Garby, and there's the Bilbao out or whatever, and the Bilbao trams, which are very nice and modern. And finally, before our interval, Burgos. Burgos, if any of you saw the film The Way, which is about Martin Sheen walking the route to Compostela. It goes through Burgos. Well, I wanted to see Burgos because of this is the entrance to one of the squares, and an entrance into the old town. But I wanted to see Burgos because of the extraordinary cathedral, made famous also because this is where the Cid, El Cid, is buried. But lavish decoration, wonderful cathedral. You've got the west towers to the right of the picture there with the two spires, and then you've got these two central towers, and they're fretworked so that the light penetrates into the cathedral. Extraordinary decoration, high Spanish Gothic. Quite fun. What's interesting, after the interval, when we look at Barcelona, you'll see how Antonio Gaudi takes this way of decorating every surface and does the same with Sagrada Familia. The west door, this is about 1250, 1300, this, not west door, sorry, south door. And with the most wonderful carving. And inside the cathedral, you've got these wonderful, wonderful pierced decorations of the towers. You can see to the right there, and then more vaulting, very simple vaulting to the left, probably some of the earliest vaulting, and getting more decorative as it goes on. Some of the tracery to the triforium arcading and nave arcading. One of the towers looking up into it. Some of the decoration inside, the gilt decoration. Inside the cloisters. Right, and then inside the cloisters, yeah. I think what we'll do is we'll stop there. What's interesting here, looking at this, is the contrast in street layouts You've got old Barcelona in the sort of higgledy-piggledy bit in the centre there, down to the port. And then you've got this very, very regular layout, which was done in the turn of the 20th century by town planners. It's an area called Example, and you've got this main diagonal road, diagonal, and each of the individual building blocks is not a square, but it's a square with the corners taken off, which creates a beautiful sort of crossroads with trees and so on. We were staying, I don't know whether people can see my arrow hovering, but we were staying round about there. But it's this area, turn of the century, where a group of architects, and I will read from the guide. It says that they're leading exponents of Catalan modernism, and they were grouped together called the Modernistes. And the most famous of them, of course, is Antoni Gaudi. But others were creating the most incredible buildings. It's their own sort of Catalan version of Art Nouveau. Barcelona is a very, very exciting city. So hopefully, my screen's frozen again. Sorry, folks. Let me go back out and let me try that again. Oh, grief. Sorry, folks, I've got problems. Flows, and unfortunately it's logged out of PowerPoint, but I'll be back in very shortly.
That's fine, Ralph, take your time.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it's here we go. I'm nearly there.
Fabulous information that you were a contemporary of John Lennon.
Yeah, same year. The school was Corriban Grammar School, very much a traditional reading, writing, and arithmetic type of grammar school, and unfortunately they couldn't cope with somebody like John Lennon, and never mind. Right, now let me see whether I'm able to go full screen. Now, are you able to see this? Have you?
Not yet, Ralph. Still looking at the screen.
Right, just hold on. So I need to go back to Zoom. Right. Zoom.
We can.
Yeah, we have. Lovely.
But
okay.
We can't.
Oh,
we can
look,
also...
it's working, and we're back up and running. Apologies.
Oh, great. That's it.
For that. Right, I was saying about the way that part of Barcelona was developed with it at the turn of the century. Just across from where we were staying, again, colourful market, wonderful varieties of and profusion of fruit and vegetables. Watch the waistline, I think, with that lot. Great little market just across from the road from where we were staying. We were staying in I think we were on the second floor of the little hotel whose entrance was near where the parking sign is there. And then if we walked to the right of the picture, we came to our breakfast little bistro cafe. It was great fun there, and fresh bread, all sorts of things, and really good cups of coffee. And then on the corner of one of these square blocks, La Pedrera, which is one of the famous buildings of Gaudi's. Now, Gaudi, I don't know what he was trying to do, but there's hardly a right angle in place. There's hardly a straight line in place. It's our idea of Art Nouveau gone mad, I suppose, but so original. There's never, well, I doubt whether there'll be anybody ever like him again. A true one-off. The guidebook says that he trained as a blacksmith. Inspired by a nationalistic search past. Whether that helps to understand this, I don't know. But up on the roof of La Pedrera, these are the chimneys, and these are fairly plain compared with some of the other chimneys and pinnacles that Gaudi did on some of his buildings, where he covers them with glazed tiles as well. Wonderful. Exotic. Don't know quite how you would describe Gaudi adequately. And from the roof of La Pedrera, across the rooftops of the buildings, sticking out is the unfinished Sagrada Familia. This is the church that Church to the Holy Family that Gaudi designed. Utterly original, but sort of inspired by Gothic. We'll come to that later. Back to La Pedrera. You can see the influence of being trained as a blacksmith with this wonderful decorative ironwork and sort of sinewy curves and to the stonework. And then just across from there's Paseo de Prado, no, I'll remember the name in a minute, but there's just to the immediate right there, there's the corner of one of the buildings, and then another Gaudi one, Casa Batlló. And again, typical Gaudi with this sinewy, curvaceous forms. This is the main staircase inside. You can see the way he sculpted the handrail, and the treads and risers have got this wonderful sort of organic quite well a one-off. One of the decorative screens on the staircase. And the light well to the building covered with glazed tiles, and he's great. There's sort of gradation in colour between the lighter colour lower down and the darker blue higher up there. And then onto the roof of Casa Batlló, and here he's gone to town with little pieces of broken glazed tiles to create these wonderful shapes and colours. That's the facade of Casa Batlló, and another modernista building to the left, which is very much more rectangular and regular and yeah, harking back to medieval times, I suppose, Gothic times, but compared with Casa Batlló, yeah, it's great. And Casa Batlló at night. And then down from where we were saying, the main road, the main pedestrianised area, Rambla, leads down to the docks, and quite a contrast to that, the inland part of Barcelona. Modern buildings, lots of shipping in. One of the original sailing boats was docked there. Another quite fun shop selling Champagne by the looks of things, but Art Nouveau. And then over towards the one of the main museums is the famous Barcelona Pavilion. The Barcelona held an international exhibition like the Great Exhibition in 1851 in Crystal Palace in London. There were a series of world exhibitions, and the one here in Barcelona was in 1929, and the famous German exile architect Mies van der Rohe designed the pavilion for it, and this is the pavilion, and it's famous. Anyone who goes to architecture school learns about Mies van der Rohe, and this extraordinary. There's the famous Barcelona chairs, all part of the pavilion, and it's the column, the star-shaped column, is in stainless steel and marble. Mies van der Rohe's famous comment is, when describing architecture, was "less is more," and it's hard to forget that this was designed in 1929. Could very well be something from 2000. And then up to one of the main museums, and looking down from the terracing over to Barcelona and the hills beyond. It's a very big city. Sagrada Familia is off picture to the right.
Yeah, no.
Market, more fruit, more colour. Go nuts and dates and apricots and oh goodness knows. Sweetie time. I think there's some meringues there, and yeah, and more sweets. The great thing about these markets is the way they lay out all these different colours. It's just wonderful. Rambla, the main drag, and we were lucky enough to go to the opera one night here, so that was great fun. The opera house is just off Rambla. And if you enjoy a plastic duck in your bath time, this is the shop for you. The duck store. I thought, boy. Barcelona Cathedral by, this is the old cathedral. It's sort of 1300, early Gothic, not too much decoration internally, but this wonderful airy structure, the vaulting columns, the apse. Another organ, facing two organs in the choir, facing each other, horizontal trumpet pipes again. You'd think I was obsessed. The Palace of Music, which is a modernista building, but I mean, it's quite fun in its decoration, exotic Art Nouveau type decoration, and yet it's not the curvaceous organic shapes of Gaudi. So this was quite fun, advertising. I don't know what it's advertising, but you know, a cow on casters with an umbrella. Yeah, I think every dairy store should have one of those. A cheese shop, perhaps. Another piece of Gaudi up in the Park Güell. Again, this curvaceous form, and then little pieces of glazed tile. He started off by raiding a tile worker's workshop where he picked up all the broken bits and thought, oh, I can use those. Looking down one of the main streets towards Sagrada Familia, It had rained very heavily the day before, and regretfully, they weren't allowing people up the tower that day. But you can get up the towers, and apparently the views from the top are pretty spectacular. But this is the main entrance, and Gaudi started the sculptures. A lot of the sculpture is still unfinished, but it was modelled out in almost cubist form, and some say they're incredibly ugly. But I find them very powerful in the fact that they're, maybe this is finished, or maybe it lacks the finesse of the Spanish Gothic. Maybe it's a sort of new brutal type of architecture decoration, but the whole of the exterior of Sagrada Familia is covered with these various pieces of biblical representation, and you can see the way the part of the main area is almost dripping with sculpture and decoration. Very, very original. There's never likely to be another one like this. 4 of the spires, some more of the and these 2 soldiers stood behind, are incredibly powerful, I think. And inside is like nothing you've ever seen before. Gaudi, the concept behind this is that he had a series of chains suspended, and these chains form, is it a catenary loop? And so if you were to turn the cathedral upside down, the vaulting, the shapes of the vaulting are all to do with this catenary. But okay, there were lots of people. I think everybody, when they walk through and they see this, go wow. There's a wow factor like nothing else. But they were playing some unaccompanied Renaissance Thomas Lewis de Vittoria choral singing in the background, and it just made you want to sit and contemplate and be quiet and soak in this most extraordinary sacred space. Me and vaulting again, and as I say, that's nothing like any of the vaulting we'd ever seen before in our lives. So original. Again, some wonderful ceiling decoration. Externally, more of the and right now, by way of complete and utter contrast, my brother and his wife are both tropical botanists, John and Yapmi. Yapmi is Sue Yapmi Sanako. She's a Javanese, and John and Yapmi met when John was working in the Botanic Gardens in Bogor. They got married, they worked at Kew, and they'd been over into the Picos de Europa in the springtime, and then they rang us up one day saying, we fancy going in the autumn to see what flowers are out then. And so we flew Manchester, Bilbao. No, did they fly? Yes, Bilbao, and then you drive along towards Santander, and then you head inland, and we arrived at Potes, which you can see to the right, middle right of the map. And that's the main town. These are the most fabulous mountains for walking, hiking, and so on. Not that we're doing much of that now at our age, but also for the botany. So we arrived at Potes to get some supplies. We were staying in a self-catering apartments in a farmhouse in a valley near Caboton, surrounded by the most beautiful mountains, called the Picos de Europa because the sailors, when sailing back from the Americas, this was the first, these limestone mountains would stand out, could be seen for miles out to sea, and so the peaks of Europe. This was the view down up the valley from the little apartment we had in an old farmhouse. And it was a question of exploring the area. Now, the great thing is that one of the main high altitude areas can be reached by cable car from the Fuente Day, and it takes you up to about 6,000 feet above sea level. So excuse the flowers from time to time in this section of the talk, because this was what we were really coming to see. And John was really quite excited by the quantity of autumn flowers. Mountain goats, very, very impressive peaks. And looking from I was going to say the summit, it was really a sort of high altitude path that we were following, looking across to some of the distant hills. Incredibly beautiful part of the world. Alpine thistle. I think these photographs probably speak for themselves. And botanically, I'm sorry, folks, but I don't know what it is. But no doubt any botanist amongst you will be able to tell me. But you'd find these little alpine flowers in amongst the cracks in the rocks. Yeah. And on our walks around the valley, there's this sort of rustic simplicity. I mean, this is in such contrast to the cities and the high Spanish Gothic and all those. This is rural vernacular architecture at its best, I suppose, using the local materials and just simplicity, but there's a beauty in that simplicity. A few roof repairs needed, I think, to the pantiling, wonderfully chaotic. And one of the houses had been restored, geraniums everywhere, beautiful. And each little village that we came to was simple. And I think we'd seen several of these. And then, of course, we go to Burgos, and John goes and say, oh, Burgos was obscene. I think he much prefers something simpler like this. And yeah, it's, as I say, incredibly beautiful. It's an area that's easy to get to in terms of, air travel to Bilbao or Santander by ferry, I suppose. Hire a car, and you're in the most extraordinary walking, driving, mountainous area. And you get these little villages perched on shoulders of the hills. We were on this particular one, we were walking on this path that's sort of bottom right there. The scenery unfolding at every turn. And you'd come across a tiny little village, and it's grown haphazardly, naturally, and then there's a tiny little church there for the locals. And this was in the next little valley to where we were. And on the sign there, it says Maison, and underneath there's two little arrows, and you'll see a knife and fork. And our apartment owner had pointed us in the direction of this village, saying we were asking him where we could eat out locally, and we were taken into this barn, and the lady at the barn brought this enormous casserole of the most fabulous food and a great big carafe of local wine. Yeah, very special. One of the little churches. And the great thing about this is on the this area here is on the route to Santiago de Compostela, and so you've got pilgrims coming down, and often they would stay the night, and as an offering, thank offering, give some money to the locals. They were able to build little churches and also employ stonemasons who had got skills in carving. And so this is probably about 1100. Simple little Romanesque window with beautiful little carved capitals and dog-tooth moulding over the window head. Again, walking, and you come across another little church. Yeah, no exotic carved doorway there, just the simple, and a profusion of petunias. Simple little water wheel, one of the villages. We were seeing llamagai, the huge birds of prey, circling overhead on one of our outings in the late afternoon, which was quite special. And then in the valley next to us, we went over, and I'd sort of thought there must be a church. There was a little village, and there must be a church. And it's this simple little church, and the carving was quite exceptional. And we were very surprised in a way to find this simple little church, but with the capitals, the entrance doorway was carved with this extraordinary carving. There's a fantastical, if I can get my arrow working, yeah, there's a fantastic sort of scrolly beast here. Goodness knows what he's doing. There's a guy on horseback here, like a soldier with a shield. There's some fantastic, so they're all, I mean, this in a way, if you think about it, is not dissimilar to some of the Celtic carving that you find in this country. And a couple of guys play little stringed instruments. But this is, as I say, is about 1100, an exceptional quality. And at the east end of the church, this wonderful carving, capitals carving, and just at the other end of the village, somebody's cart with, they're obviously pleased with their cart and their petunias. So, and one of the evening shots. So that's me.